Alright, so in today's video, we're going to be talking about making films with your iPhone. Now, before you click off this video, because every YouTuber seems to be making videos about shooting a film or making videos with your smartphone. It's talked about a lot, and I get that. But the reason I want to talk about this is not necessarily because I want to get into the technical aspects of shooting something with a smartphone, but I kind of want to talk about how limiting yourself to shooting something with your smartphone can actually help you grow as a filmmaker. And one thing that I think is really valuable is when you're forced to make something with a piece of gear that does have a lot of limitations. Now, earlier this year, I shot a short travel skate film for the Moment Invitational Film Festival. Now, I didn't place in that festival, but apparently I came in as a runner-up, and Moment was nice enough to send me some of their gear. So I got one of their phone cases, and I went with the Superfish lens that they have because I do like to film a lot of skateboarding. But making that film that I called Haystack, one of my main goals was I went into it and I wanted to make sure that you couldn't tell straight off the bat that it was shot with a smartphone. So one of the things that you have as a limitation when you shoot with smartphones is that there's only two ways to adjust the exposure. And with normal cameras like the camera that I'm shooting on, there's three ways. You can adjust the exposure with ISO, shutter speed, and then opening or closing the aperture on your lens. Now, with a smartphone, you only have control over two. You can only change the shutter speed and the ISO with your smartphone. There's a fixed lens in this phone that you can't adjust the aperture for. Another kind of limitation is the fact that this phone has a very, very small sensor. It's like the size of an ant or something like that. So getting shallow depth of field and getting great low light performance is just not something that you're going to be able to do with a smartphone. So I knew those limitations before going into trying to make a film for the film festival. So I had to take a couple of steps to get around those limitations that I had filming something with my smartphone. So filming my short video Haystack, one of the main things that I knew I was going to try to avoid early on was moving the camera too much, because especially with smartphones, it's really easy to tell that it's shot on a phone once you start moving it around, because you get those micro jitters from the internal stabilization trying to counteract any other kind of stabilization that you have, like a gimbal or even trying to walk smoothly. So I decided to move my camera as little as I possibly can. Sure, it made the whole film a little bit more simplistic, but I think that it actually worked for what I was trying to do. And one of the things that I knew I really wanted to do was be able to crop in, punch in and punch out. So I did shoot that entire short in 4K. And one of the apps that I used to get the best quality 4K that I possibly could was an app called Procam, and I shoot in the 4K Max option. From what I've read, I think that the 4K Max actually shoots 24 like JPEGs per second, kind of, and then puts it into a video file. So those are the two things that I knew I was going to do. I knew I was going to shoot in the Procam app, and I knew I wasn't going to move the camera too much, and I wanted to shoot in 4K. But one of the biggest things that helped me when I was shooting that short was I didn't have like a Moment case or any Moment lenses or any ND filters. I just had the bare iPhone lens. And so what I wanted to do was to make sure that I could control my exposure without having to jump up my shutter speed, because I feel like one of the biggest things that gives away smartphone footage is the irregular motion blur that you see, because since you can't control the aperture, there's no way of really controlling your exposure in really bright situations unless you bump your shutter speed up, which makes motion blur unrealistic. And so one piece of kit that I purchased that helped me a lot was this little thing. This is a clip-on variable ND filter that you can just take and clip right onto your phone. And what this allowed me to do was to actually adjust the exposure of my video with this variable ND instead of having to bump my shutter speed up. So I could keep my ISO as low as it needed to be, and I could keep my shutter at 1/48 when I was shooting 24p, and then I could actually control the exposure using this variable ND filter. Sure, it took a little bit of the sharpness out, but that is again why I shot in the 4K Max mode on the Procam app, so I could get as much detail and resolution as possible. But yeah, this is like a little $20 variable ND that you can clip onto your phone and be able to control the exposure of your video. So that was a really cheap and simple solution to get over the fact that this smartphone has limitations when you want to shoot video. And shooting that video, I shot it over the course of like 3 days, going back and forth to different spots and trying to get, cool different locations. But it was really fun to see what I could do with my smartphone. So yeah, I would just really encourage you, I talk a lot about cameras and different kinds of gear on this channel, but it is a really great thing to figure out what the limitations are of your camera and then see how you can overcome those limitations. Problem solve. If you have a camera that isn't that great in low light, well, instead of buying a new camera, start learning how to light your scene better. Or if you have a camera that doesn't have internal image stabilization, buy an inexpensive camera stabilizer and figure out how to use it as best you possibly can. There's like small and inexpensive things that you can do to improve your filmmaking without actually going out and buying a new camera. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to talk about today. If you want to check out that little short that I made called Haystack for the Moment Invitational, I'll put a little card right up there. If you want to, pick up this little variable ND filter for your phone, I'll have a link in the description. And I also made a set of LUTs that I've been using for my smartphone footage, and I use those LUTs on my film Haystack. So if you're interested in those, they're on my Selfie account. Links will be in the description. Thank you so much for watching. There's more videos over here if you want to check those out. But until next time, I'll see you all later. Bye.